As a run-and-gun videographer that covers all types of different gigs, live concerts have quickly become one of my favorite events to capture. But live concerts are definitely a bit different than your average ordinary gig. And while you might find a lot of other videos out there talking about how to cover concerts by just capturing some slow-motion B-roll, that doesn't cover the real-world scenario of needing to film a multi-camera concert, capture great audio with it, and being able to put together a full edit of the event end-to-end. So without further ado, 5 practical tips for filming concert videography that, well, up to this point, no one tells you. Number 1. Capture quality, redundant audio. Now, the topic of audio could honestly be a video unto itself, but it is worth its own section for sure in covering concert videography. Because as the adage goes, if audio is typically half a video, it is perhaps even more important in the case of filming a concert. Now, this should go without saying, but if you own a DSLR or mirrorless camera, these cameras typically come with a small scratch microphone built into the body. And while this might be adequate for being able to just grab an audio signal and sync up footage in post later, this is certainly not going to come anywhere close to any quality audio signal you'd want to use for a concert. In my particular case, to level up quality, at least with run-and-gun concert coverage gigs, I have really a couple of key devices that I use, both of which I've covered in separate reviews on this channel, which you can check out. Now, perhaps most important here is my Zoom H6, which I have 2 of them, one of which I will usually plug into either the soundboard and or do a direct out from the speaker via, say, an XLR cable. This is going to give me an accurate capture of the board feed and whatever was coming out of the PA system at the time, which may be useful, but it is worth noting that a lot of sound engineers, particularly in smaller venues, will tune what comes out of the PA system to what they're hearing in the room. Therefore, you're likely to get things that are louder, like vocals or keyboards, and devices which don't have direct amplifiers on stage, but perhaps lower volumes of things like guitars and bass and drums that you would hear or that are more acoustically amplified on the stage. And it is for that reason that I will also take another Zoom H6 and place that somewhere in the vicinity of the band, but also perhaps toward the edge of the crowd and be able to capture what the room hears of the actual musical performance using its XY microphones. The built-in XY microphones provide a really good stereo sound that tends to really reflect what the audio and environment sounded like at the time I was filming, and so in many cases this ends up being one of the best options for audio. Now, for my other cameras where I still want to ensure I get some form of usable audio, I will also then use my Rode VideoMic NTGs. Again, usually ensuring that at least on one of the cameras this is positioned in such a place where I would be able to get a decent signal out of that and have yet another option I can use. And really all this comes back to one word that I mentioned at the start of this point, which was redundancy. You really want to have multiple points of being able to capture audio and many options when you bring your footage back in post to be able to cut or use different audio sources if need be. One other point I'll mention is the fact that you could of course take an external field recorder like the H6, put a couple of different stereo mics, say one at each end of the speakers and of the stage, and be able to capture sound this way. Again, a lot of this depends probably on the budget and the actual location in which you're filming in terms of what's possible. But once we've discussed the audio portion of things, we have to move on to video, and there are a lot of things to talk about video. To point number 2, get full coverage with your cameras. Now, a lot of this will depend on how many cameras you're using to film the concert and or what location you're filming in to begin with. In my particular case, I try to employ a 3-camera setup with most of the concerts I've been filming as of late, which are these sort of teen rock school events. Generally, I want a wide shot of the entire stage that is near dead on center, a medium-ish type of shot that is usually to the side or showing a slightly different perspective of the stage, and then a medium to tight angle that I will often use in going handheld to capture more close-up shots and kind of unique elements there. With these angles, I'm usually making sure of a couple things. Number 1, if that wide angle does not completely show the different band members and everything going on the stage, I will make sure that that second medium focal length angle covers for this and reflects the other people that are not seen in the wide shot, say if a drummer was blocked for some reason. Number 2, it is also for the fact that I can get some static save shots that I can rely on, and that will be my safety net in terms of camera coverage while I play around a bit more and get creative with my tight handheld angle. Trying to get consistent coverage across different venues will be a really interesting challenge and is going to be one of those tests that will definitely tell you if and when you do not have the right lenses for the job. I can certainly say camera blocking bars and clubs is a world apart from camera blocking a larger concert venue, and as you're seeing now on screen as I go through different examples, you're going to need a lot of different lenses to cover you in different situations depending on what type of venue you're shooting in. But the ultimate goal here is that with some level of predictability, you can get those shots you need and be able to still get shots that you want as well and play around with ideas. Now, continuing on the video coverage front, for those static angles specifically, it is worth pointing out number 3. lock down your settings. This comes in a couple of specific ways, but this is really going to be important here. If you have any cameras that will not have an operator behind them, you want their shots to be as solid as possible. As a video shooter, you should already be familiar with the concept that you're going to want to rely on manual exposure for getting your shots rather than, say, shutter priority or aperture priority, or using auto ISO in a scenario like this. And this is particularly true in a concert scenario because if you have different colored RGB lights and bright spotlights getting brighter and dimmer as the show goes on, that is going to wreak havoc on any sort of auto exposing camera. And yet another area where this can also wreak havoc is with regard to white balance. Again, a mix of colors and color temperatures and brightness levels is going to be a bit of a concern there as well. So more than likely you're going to want to pick a white balance across your cameras and stick to it throughout. But yet another thing you're going to want to think about is, for those cameras without an operator, locking down your focus as well. Sticking to manual focus for these cameras will ensure that you do not have any unpredictable things happen if you have someone accidentally come into frame, or as can sometimes inevitably happen, someone walks by your camera and that causes the focus to completely shift and ruins your shot for some period of time. Mainly this is again about ensuring that your safe shots are actually safe. This is a lot of similar things that I would often do in a camera blocking scenario, say if I were filming a wedding ceremony, and in that regard, some of those similarities do apply here to the concert case. But for one point that is a totally unique concert thing, let's talk about point number 4. Weigh down your tripods. Most people will not even think of this as being a thing they need to consider, but you will learn your lesson the hard way, as I definitely did in one particular gig, as you're now seeing. Simply put, if you're in an untreated room or any room where you have a lot of bass going on, or you're in direct line of, say, speakers and or subwoofers, you are likely to encounter some sort of rumble or shake that will affect your shot in terms of the tripod or whatever stabilizer your camera is on. My preferred method for eliminating this issue is using some of the Matthews BOA bags. Now these are weighted lead shot bags that come in a number of different weights. I have the 10-pound variant specifically, and I do like these because they're made out of lead shot. If one were to, say, break, you would not have sand going everywhere like you would with a traditional sandbag. But perhaps even more importantly, they're designed such that they can easily wrap around the center post of your tripod, and so within a few seconds you can easily steady up and weigh down your tripod and not have any concern of having camera shake or jitter from bass rumble or any other loud decibel sounds. And once you've covered points 1 through 4 that I've mentioned here, now you can move on to point number 5, which is simply get creative. Do you have a random iPhone or GoPro angle that you want to try that's a bit unique? Go for it. Are you wondering what it might look like to do a really kind of raw handheld parallax shot as the concert intensifies, or being able to play around with manual focus shots in addition to autofocus? Go for it. The entire goal of thinking of all these previous points by getting your audio shored up and having quality redundant sources, having a number of safe static shots with lockdown settings that won't have any shake or unpredictable movements in them, are all meant to ensure that you have some ability and freedom to do what you want, and to be able to treat this as a fun gig that you can approach from a creative perspective, rather than just ticking all of the boxes. To be fair, there's probably more I's to dot and T's to cross on concert gigs than your typical gig, but that does not mean you cannot go without having some fun. But alright, I usually have some trouble sticking to my finite numbered list here, so I'm gonna throw in one more thing you should consider. Do you own any cameras that have a 30-minute recording limit? If you raise your hand and the answer is yes to that, what you're going to want to do is ensure you have the ability to access those cameras and check on them periodically throughout the show. Perhaps even more importantly, you might want to set a timer, say on your phone or your watch, or something that will notify you of when you need to start and stop recording on these cameras that have that limit. Of course, if you are starting and stopping your cameras, you want to ensure that at least one of these is rolling at any given time. But that should go without saying, right? And so those are my 5 practical tips around concert videography that likely no one's told you, but you will definitely want to know. Now, hopefully this video has been of some help to you. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if it has. I'm definitely going to be covering more sort of retrospective behind the scenes overviews of gigs that I take on like this. And I have a number of more experiences to share, say on the wedding side of things, as well as commercial work, so definitely subscribe if you like that. For now, that is all I have to say, so thanks for watching.